number 10, the 10th best team in the National Football League is the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are the 10th best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So, a brutal loss at home for Cincinnati to the New England Patriots, in which Joe Burrow did not play well, turned the football over. In terms of the running game, it appears they may have missed Joe Mixon more than I thought they might have, especially when you look at what Joe Mixon did with the Texans. More on them later. But it's offensively for Cincinnati. This is kind of what we see from the Bengals to start every season between week 1 and week 2. Joe Burrow has a record. He's like 1-8 or something in his career between week 1 and week 2. Jamar Chase apparently was dealing with food poisoning. T. Higgins didn't play last week. Reports say he's kind of iffy on whether he's going to play this week in what's a gigantic matchup for the Bengals in Arrowhead against the Kansas City Chiefs. I guess the upside, if there is any, is that despite the fact they gave up well over 100 rushing yards to the New England Patriots, is the fact that it was 16 points. It's New England. It's not a special roster by any means, but the only reason Cincinnati stayed in my top 10 despite losing, as an 8.5 point favorite at home is because I have to, at this point, bake into my mind, this is kind of what they do to start the season with Joe Burrow. They get off to slow starts for whatever reason. I don't know if Burrow's wrist is still bothering him. Usually he comes in the season injured. I don't know if Burrow's wrist is still bothering him. We'll see. But this is still a really talented Bengals roster. Excellent skill position group. Defensively, I get that they have some questions, but Lou Anarumo is one of the best defensive coordinators in the sport. And Cincinnati has a history of when Burrow's healthy, they minimum get to the AFC Championship game. So the Bengals are the 10th best team in the National Football League. At number 9, making their debut on season debut on Bryce's Best 10, it is the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys are the 9th best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So Dallas, a dominant 33-17 win over the Cleveland Browns, in which Dak Prescott, as I talked about on Monday's show, and this clip is on YouTube if you want to check it out. Dak did all of his damage, or virtually all of his damage, in the first quarter and change, in which the game was within one score. He was dealing at that point when the score was within one score in Cleveland. Dak Prescott, passer rating, I believe, of 113, a touchdown, completed almost 70% of his passes, was spot on the money, throwing sidearm. Dak was slinging it to CeeDee Lamb and to others. Listen, I still have major questions about this receiving core in Dallas outside of CeeDee Lamb. If, God forbid, knock on wood, CeeDee Lamb were to go down, they are in rough shape with the weapons that they have around Dak. Defensively is where I was impressed. Now, you do have to factor in that's Deshaun Watson, who's not good at football, and Cleveland, who, as a result, is kind of limited. They deal with some offensive line injuries. We get that. But Micah Parsons was the man amongst boys, as was DeMarcus Lawrence, as was Kendricks, the linebacker. Defensively, Trayvon Diggs was outstanding. Their secondary was great. This is going to have to be a year for Dallas where Dak and CeeDee Lamb keeps the Cowboys' offense afloat, and the defense is going to have to do some serious damage in order for them to do anything close to what they've been attempting to do since 1995, which is, of course, forget winning a Super Bowl, just getting to an NFC Championship game. The Cowboys are the 9th best team in the National Football League. Staying in their state, the state of Texas, at number 8, it is the Houston Texans. The Texans are the 8th best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So Houston with a very impressive, albeit 2-point divisional win in Indianapolis against the Colts, a team that with Gardner Minshew nearly knocked them out of the playoffs a year ago. Thing was with Houston, so Stroud was great. There was a third down late in the game that the Texans were able to pick up that may have saved them from losing because their defense had struggled all afternoon against Anthony Richardson, against the Colts run game. The fact that Will Anderson and this Texans team, Danielle Hunter, as talented as they are, bit of a rough outing. They gave up some big plays down the field in the run game to the Indianapolis Colts. Houston has another game coming up this week against the Chicago Bears. Sunday night game. Going to be very interesting to watch that. The thing with the Houston Texans is they're a stacked roster in terms of their young players on both sides of the ball. We know who D'Amico Ryans is. At this point, I think we're fairly confident in who C.J. Stroud is. The addition of Joe Mixon, how about his performance in Indianapolis? How about 159 rush yards on 30 carries and a touchdown? They've got Dameon Pierce. They've got a stacked run game. If this team just continues to kind of build off the momentum of last year, if the youth and inexperience doesn't end up hurting them, this is very much a Super Bowl contender in the AFC. But that's my only concern for Houston is the youth and inexperience. The Texans are the 8th best team in the National Football League. At number 7, the first team, or rather the second team on this list that lost a game in week 1, it is the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens are the 7th best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So Baltimore, ironically, was actually at 8 last week. They went up to 7. So there were things in that game against Kansas City that concern me a little bit for the Ravens. Derrick Henry, after the first quarter, didn't look to have a whole heck of a lot of burst. Lamar Jackson obviously missed the throw to Zay Flowers and missed some deep ball throws in that game against Kansas City. But you do also have to factor in it's Kansas City on banner night in Arrowhead Stadium. So that presents a whole different challenge. And the Ravens, had they made a few plays here or there, could have easily won that game. It's still an excellent defense. They've still got guys like Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, who had the game of his life. Zay Flowers is really talented. I love this Ravens roster, but as we know, history shows when you lose in week 1 to the team that beat you in the playoffs, oftentimes you miss the playoffs. That's the only thing that keeps me back on believing in the Ravens as a top-of-the-line Super Bowl contender. I don't think they'll miss the playoffs, but I think this is a football team that can still do some serious damage. The Ravens are the 7th best team in the National Football League. At number 6, a team that's playing tomorrow night, it is the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are the 6th best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So, thing is with Buffalo, it was such an odd game against Arizona. Week 1, we'll often have these games. We don't know what a team's going to be. So again, week 1's the hardest week in the NFL to bet. Week 2, because of the overreaction, is often the easiest week to bet. The thing is with Buffalo, I didn't see anything from them that, aside from a shaky defensive performance, I didn't see anything for the Bills that shocked me. Well, let's see. Josh Allen, and when he's at his best, can be superhuman. Running the football, throwing the football. Bills were down 14 points to the Cardinals at home, albeit, but they were able to come back in the game. They were able to limit Marvin Harrison Jr. in this football game throughout. I think Harrison Jr. had like 1 catch. Kyler Murray did all he could to try and put them in position to win. There was an officiating no call at the end that could have went one way or the other. Who knows? I still love Buffalo's offensive skill personnel in terms of their tight ends, in terms of Khalil Shakir. I still believe in Keon Coleman, and we know who Josh Allen is. My guess is Sean McDermott will get that defense fixed sooner rather than later. The Bills, still kind of underrated. The 6th best team in the National Football League. Moving into the top 5, and this team did not move a spot from where they were last week. At number 5, it is the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are the 5th best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So, I keep hearing about the Los Angeles Chargers. 22 points. The passing game was just not anything necessarily to write home about with what we saw from them. Their 22-10 win over the Las Vegas Raiders. Here's how I would counter that. Do we think Jim Harbaugh's a good coach? Yeah, I think we all agree with that. Do we agree that Justin Herbert, when he's at his best, is one of the 10 best quarterbacks on planet Earth? Yeah, I think we pretty much agree with that. Do we agree that when Jim Harbaugh comes into a college football program or an NFL organization, that he immediately improves the run game? Well, yeah, the evidence certainly shows that. And the fact the Chargers ran for 176 yards. J.K. Dobbins had 135 of those on 10 carries. Do we agree with the fact that Justin Herbert, when you give him time to throw, when the guys are able to separate down the field, that he's able to be really effective? Yeah, I think we mostly agree with that, because the fact that the Chargers scored 2 touchdowns in the 4th quarter of this football game. Listen, this is a Chargers team that I think is going way, way, way too under the radar this season. I love this defense, coached obviously by Jim Harbaugh's new coaching staff. I think they're doing a great job in terms of his staff. Greg Roman runs the offense. We know that there's some questions there. We understand that. Here's what we know. Greg Roman helped the brief rise of Colin Kaepernick with the 49ers. He helped the start of Lamar Jackson with the Ravens. I think he's going to help Justin Herbert, give him a solid running game, good support system. This Chargers team is going to out-physical you. It's going to beat you down. It's going to run the football effectively. This is a Chargers team that can do some really, really, really major damage over the course of this season. And by the way, the early part of their schedule, not bad. Don't say I didn't tell you early about this Chargers team. The LA Chargers are the 5th best team in the National Football League. Staying in the City of Angels at number 4 and only dropping 1 spot, it is the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams are the 4th best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So, I was going to keep the Rams, honest to God, at number 3 despite the loss to Detroit. The only reason I moved them back is because of the injuries they suffered to multiple key players, most notably Puka Nacua. That's going to be something that I think could really hurt the Rams in the future, is that if it's just a Cooper Kupp, Kyron Williams-centric offense, listen, they still have Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford. That's going to be something that's going to be able to get them over the top in a lot of these future games. Without Puka Nacua, listen, I still think this is a very talented football team. This is a team that up until the last 2 minutes on the road against the Detroit Lions and the stacked offense that is, held them to 17 points. Almost completely shut them down in the second half of that game. Matthew Stafford put on a clinic throwing the football in the fourth quarter, as did his buddy and my twin, Cooper Kupp. Sean McVay is one of the 5 best coaches in professional football. We know this to be true. Defensively, again, there was questions with the loss of Aaron Donald. I don't think you could have possibly asked for a whole heck of a lot more given the circumstances. Sunday Night Football in Detroit against the stacked Detroit Lions. I love where the Rams are right now. I still have them winning the NFC West and making the NFC Championship game. The Rams are the fourth best team in the National Football League. Their division rival at number 3 is in the top 3. It is the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners, the third best team in the National Football League. And here's why. They still have as good of a case as anybody in the sport that they have the best roster in the league. You talk about a San Francisco 49ers team that we get it against the Jets. I don't buy the Jets in the slightest. But still, Monday Night Football, big stage, solo game. Listen, the Niners had a noisy offseason. Trent Williams was holding out. Brandon Ayuk was holding in. Christian McCaffrey didn't play on Monday night against the Jets. And you got this kid, Jordan Mason, coming in, rushing for $150. Brock Purdy not turning the ball over, putting the football where it needed to be in key situations, making some tough, tight window throws, which I was very impressed with. Haven't seen as much of that as I would like to see from Purdy. If he's able to get better at that, kudos to him. George Kittle played well. Deebo Samuel doing what he does. And this, listen, even despite the absences of Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw, this is still a fantastic 49ers defense. They still have Travarius Ward. They still have the best linebacker in the game in Fred Warner. They still have one of the premier pass rushers in the sport in Nick Bosa, with Leonard Floyd, who's one of the better number 2 pass rushers in the NFL to boot. Kyle Shanahan's a brilliant coach. This is a great coaching staff. I think that Sorensen kid is going to do a really, really good job with this defense. The Niners are the third best team in the National Football League. At number 2, let me hear what you got to say, Dan Campbell and Oprah Winfrey, about these Detroit Lions.
Kneecap.
That's right. At number 2, it is the Detroit Lions. The Lions are the second best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So listen, I picked this team to go to the Super Bowl out of the NFC. I don't see what there is not to like. This is a team that rushes the football as well as anybody in the league. This is a team that, with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, has the best 1-2 duo in the backfield in football. They have the best offensive line in football. Jared Goff is a top 10 or fringe top 10 guy in the league. When he has a clean pocket, he's a no doubt top 10 guy in the league. Jamison Williams, who I told y'all, this kid's going to have a big year now that he's healthy, now that he's not suspended, caught a long touchdown this game against the Rams. Amon-Ra St. Brown, along with Mike Evans, the most underrated receiver in the NFL. Sam Laporta, best young tight end in the NFL. And this defense, yes, they had some struggling moments in the second half against Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp. Who doesn't? When those two are rolling, They added Terry Arnold. They got the kid Carlton Davis to kind of bolster that secondary. Aiden Hutchinson may have made the play of the game just to get the ball back in the hands of that Detroit offense to tie that football game. Dan Campbell, we know the coach he is. Ben Johnson's the best OC in professional football. I love what this Detroit Lions team has done throughout the years in the draft. Obviously, adding Jared Goff and the Stafford trade to kind of build this thing, from the ground up. Listen, this is a Lions team that arguably, along with San Francisco, has the most stacked offense in professional football. The Texans have an argument for that as well. And then defensively, what was their Achilles heel a year ago has now become a strength, along with an offense that will beat you up and beat you down. This Lions team is going to play you for 60 minutes plus. Doesn't matter what the score is, doesn't matter what the situation is. They are going to beat you up. They are going to wear you down and see who lasts the longest at the end. And newsflash, more times than not, it is going to be the second best team in the National Football League, the Detroit Lions. And it's anticlimactic, but at number 1, let's not spend too much time on this. It is obviously the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are the best team in the National Football League, and here's why. So again, best quarterback in the world. One of the best tight ends still in the league, and arguably one of the greatest tight ends ever in Travis Kelce. A defense with Chris Jones and some good young pieces like Trent McDuffie, who, again, had a great year last year. I think is going to flourish in that number 1 corner role. Listen, this is a Chiefs team that, without Hollywood Brown, I think it's Aminihu, I believe is his name. The other guy was missing some key weapons for the squad. Noah Gray steps up. Xavier Worthy made 2 of the biggest plays of the game on the reverse, on the deep ball, in the busted coverage against Baltimore. This team is elite situationally. This team does not lose often at home in the Patrick Mahomes era. And again, the Chiefs offense, this is wild to say, but was the Achilles, I shouldn't say the Achilles heel, but took a back seat, or at least sat in the passenger seat, to their defense a year ago. And their defense, while it may not be quite what it was a year ago with the loss of L'Jarius Sneed, is still dang good. And this offense is starting to resemble that against a great Ravens defense, by the way, scored 27 on Baltimore. Is starting to resemble that old 2022, and dare I say, pre-2022, with Xavier Worthy playing a Tyreek Hill, a poor man's Tyreek Hill light version in this Kansas City Chiefs offense, to where teams have to respect the deep ball, which is going to open it up for the run game, which is going to open up more for Kelsey and Noah Gray. Listen, this is a team that's going to make some serious noise. The Kansas City Chiefs are the best team in the National Football League. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.